Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the David Mathis Show. I'm really excited today because I'm kind of venturing off of the whole fitness and training realm and digging into one of my other passions, which is horses. And most of you guys know that. And today I've got Ryan Rose, renowned horse trainer, on. Ryan's been a horse trainer for 15 years or so, I think, at this point, something like that.
Yeah, even more.
Puts out amazing content. I actually was just telling him this is the first time him and I are meeting, but been a big fan of his. And he has indirectly helped me a lot with my mare and my colt. So I appreciate some of those tips that he puts out on his content. But Ryan, welcome to the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So obviously, I want to kind of dig into a little bit about how you got into horses. Was it at an early age? Was it later on in life? What's kind of the story about getting into horses and your love for wanting to become a trainer?
Yeah, I had the bug right away from being a little kid, just always
Yeah.
wanting to be around horses and being drawn to them. And then when I got into like high school, my parents decided to homeschool us, and I wasn't able to play school sports anymore. And they finally started letting me take riding lessons.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I was pretty hooked after that.
You know, it's funny. My wife and I actually literally just we have a 2.5 year old. I got a 2.5 year old daughter who, I mean, since day one, she's been around the horses and everything like that. And she's now we have them on property. We moved up to Indiana so I could buy a bunch more property and actually have them on property instead of boarding them. And so every day she loves the horses. She does all that. But my wife and I were literally just out to eat the other day. We had one of those rare parent date nights. When you have a toddler, you don't get out a whole lot. And we
That's
were
what
actually talking a lot about like homeschooling and everything. That was a huge topic of conversation. Obviously, she's a little ways away from that and everything, but it's really interesting to talk to you and find out that you were homeschooled. And one of the big things that we find attractive about it is, I mean, other than all the crazy stuff that's going on with school systems these days, is just the fact that she can be around the animals, the horses, the chickens and goats, and learn actual skills and stuff like that. And selfishly for me, because I work from home, having her around, being able to take her riding anytime during the day is kind of a fun idea for me too. But what was homeschooling like for you?
well, we only did it for a few years, and then ended up going to a private school, but um, it was great. It was great because I got to spend
Yeah.
a lot of time with horses, and I think at that time when I was 15, I also became a farrier, and
Oh,
so
did you? Okay.
I kind of started working pretty early. It allowed me to like pursue everything horses, so I was in every activity. I didn't miss any event in our area, and we were up in the middle of nowhere in the UP of Michigan at the
Oh,
time, and
I've done a
so
lot of snowmobiling up in that area in my
yeah.
younger years, that's for sure. So actually, so I have never done any farrier work or anything like that, but I've actually been thinking a lot lately about trying to, apprentice with somebody. I've got a good farrier here that I use for my horses, and he's actually getting a little bit older, and he's like, I'm kind of dwindling down my clientele at this point and everything. But just from a standpoint of saving money, being able to
Yeah,
do it myself, so you at 15, you're not only learning a skill, you're making money, but you're saving money too.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So were your parents really into horses, or was this something that you kind of just, you had them around and it's just something that you fell in love with?
My dad is really into farming. He grew up on a farm, and then my mom was into horses when she was a kid.
Yeah.
But then they kind of got away from that, and we lived in town for a while. Eventually, they ended up buying a farm in the country that we had our horses on and some farm animals and stuff. But yeah,
Nice. My mom was the same way. She grew up with horses, and she's actually the first one that kind of instilled that love of horses in me. Um, and we had horses, and then my parents got divorced, and we moved into town, got rid of the horses, stuff like that, and then I picked it back up later on in my youth in another way and stuff. But yeah, moms have a way of kind of getting their kids into horses. It's usually the mom, I think, that's got the love for horses that passes it on to them and stuff. But
yeah.
what kind of farming was your dad into?
He grew up on a dairy farm, but he just
Oh,
loved. His career was a troop, Michigan State trooper,
oh
but
wow,
he just loved farming. So he loved baling hay and
yeah.
just all things farm related.
Did you guys just like farm for yourselves, or did you sell stuff?
No, no, it was just like a hobby farm. We just
Just
had
hobby
horses
farm.
and chickens and
Yeah, that's what
pigs
my
and
wife's
cows.
starting to turn. That's what my wife's starting to turn ours into. We have just in the other room, we have 18 baby chicks that are in a what are they called? The burnt, I don't know, whatever it is. The When they're
Incubator.
young, they have to be in a small cage and regulate the heat and stuff. But
Yep.
I want to get some cattle. down the road. Definitely want to get
Yeah.
some cattle. I just bought some more property right next to me, so I got a little bit more room here. But
Yeah.
um, you talked about you competed a lot and stuff as a kid. Like, what sort of stuff did you compete in terms of
Um,
horses?
yeah. Well, basically, I just went to like local shows. I did a little
Yeah,
team penning. I was into rodeo for a little while. Rode bareback horses.
I was gonna
Um,
ask, were you a bucking horse guy?
yeah, I wasn't very
Yeah,
good at it though, so I got
never got any bulls though, huh?
no, no. And
Yeah,
it was kind of an expensive hobby, so I would get down to the rodeo and make a little extra money trimming horses when I was there, and so I decided I might
yeah.
do
Those
some.
entry fees can be a little rough, that's for sure. And if you're not making the money, it's just those long weekends and a lot of money thrown away at rodeos.
Yeah, exactly. It was a one-way street for me.
Oh man. What are so obviously, kind of growing up around horses and everything, you talk about your mom's love for horses kind of instilled that on you. What other inspirations did you have growing up? Like did you always think that you were going to be a trainer, or did you kind of just, I don't know, think I'm going to have horses my whole life and just enjoy that? Like, was this a career path that you thought of?
It wasn't originally, it was just fun.
Yeah.
And but I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And actually, I was really involved in like 4-H, and I was in
Yeah.
like every horse club in the area. I was in all of them. Like even if they were a club from 3 hours away from me, I was in their club.
Oh
And so
wow.
just any horse activity that I could do, I would do. And our local 4-H group brought in a clinician named Dan Grunwald, who is still based in Wisconsin and is training horses there. By the end of the clinic, he was actually having me help other people that were in the clinic.
How old are
And
you at this time?
probably 16.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so then he offered to let me come down and ride with him for a couple weeks at his place that summer. So I did that. And then at the end of that, but the day I was leaving, we went and had breakfast, and he looked at me like kind of real serious, and he's like, what did he say? I think he basically said, "You're going to pass me up someday." He's like, "You need to do this and should pursue this as a living." I was like, "Wow, I hadn't really thought of that." And I was like, "Well, what should I do?" And he's like, "Well, you should start, ride as many horses as you can and start teaching clinics and stuff like that." So literally, when I was 16 years old, I taught my first clinic. Actually, I was 15 years old because I didn't have a driver's license yet, and I just
That's
taught a
nuts.
clinic for our local 4-H club. One
Do you
of
remember how
the
many
three
people?
that I was in.
Do you remember how many people came?
I think there was like 8 people. And right when I got there, the ambulance was leaving. A lady had like hurt herself real bad. Her horse crowded her through a door. And
Oh,
like it was like I showed up in my first event, and it was like chaos right off the bat. And then I kind of
hey,
got that
baptism
horse
by fire there, I guess.
going in and out of the doorway without barging through it. And then they had trouble loading, so we got him loaded up, and then we carried on with it. And basically, I just emulated what I saw Dan do because I traveled with him doing several clinics,
Okay.
and I just made it up as I went. I think it was free too. I think the first few clinics I did, it was free. I just went and did them.
Yeah, just gain the experience and
Yeah.
communication skills and stuff. Do you
Yep.
remember? Obviously, I'm sure you do remember. What was your first horse? Like your first, like true Ryan Rose's horse.
Yeah. I had a Palomino named Flick, court horse.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice.
And she actually was what led me into getting into learning how to train because she was kind of challenging.
Oh, okay.
She was a fairly right-brained type horse and more go-y.
Yeah.
And even though she was older, she was like 15 when I got her. She was kind of a handful. And so I was actually getting scared of her. And so I had to decide I was either going to get rid of her or I was going to figure this out. And the thought of like sending her to somebody for training never crossed my mind. I just started reading books and
Yeah.
watching videos and figuring it out.
So you mentioned something, and it wasn't my listeners are not in the horse world mostly. I mean, they know that it's kind of a side world of mine, but you talked about right brain. So there's the right brain, left brain kind of dynamic. Can you explain that a little bit with horses so that people can kind of get a context of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So right brain means they're operating a little bit more off an instinctual fear response. Horses can also be left brained where they're more like confident, curious about things, that sort of thing. But if they're innately, whatever they are innately, you can't really change that. You can just add training skills and stuff like that. But so her default was always to be afraid of things and to get faster if she became afraid.
Yeah.
And so that made it, so that made her spooky trying to trail ride her, made her hard to ride her by herself. She would get impulsive and fast riding. And so it was just a lot of fear-based behaviors that I had to work through.
How long did it take you to work through them? I mean, obviously, she's never going to fully, release
Yeah.
that, but how long until you felt, okay, I'm not really afraid to get on this horse anymore?
Probably from the time I started having issues till that was probably like till I felt like pretty confident where I was like riding her bridleless and
Hmm.
showing her successfully and stuff like that. It was probably like 3 years.
Oh, wow. I've never ridden bridleless before. That takes a whole level of confidence right there. That's for sure.
So I was really dumb. So I went and watched a Pat Pirelli tour stop,
Hmm.
and I saw a lot of people riding their horses around bridleless, and I was like, oh, I could do that. So I literally went home, saddled my horse up, and started riding across a field, and everything was going okay until there was a little like hole in the ground that an animal had broken. It was on a trail that I rode pretty regularly,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
was cantering kind of fast, and she like ducked to the side, fell
Oh,
off, and hurt my shoulder, and yeah,
I
I just
I
thought
have a I have a
I was
15
literally
year
that
old.
guy that just go home and try and see what would happen, and you know,
Hey, that's probably why you're a successful trainer, because you have that respect, right, for him, but you also aren't super fearful of it. Like, you're like, I'm gonna fall off at times, like I'm gonna get bucked off, like it's gonna happen. Like, you don't let that hold you back. And I'm sure that's probably
yeah,
what's excelled your career quite a bit too, is and being good at that, plus just having a knack for it. And you talked about the right brain, that Palomino. I've got a 15-year-old bay gelding who's very right brained, but he's an old ranching horse that I got about a year and a half ago. And I think that he went through some trauma, like in his younger years and stuff. And he's one of those that's definitely like, I mean, he's very sweet, very gentle, but if there's one little thing, like if the corn starts blowing next to us, the corn stalks, he'll just dart. And I
yeah,
took him off to a local trainer here for about 4 weeks to kind of just work through a little bit of stuff. And um, I was able to, like, the first week he was there, I wasn't allowed to really be there. And then the second week, he started incorporating me into it a little bit more and more and more. And I remember the first time I started loping him to the right. Um, my trainer, he couldn't figure out why every time he started loping him to the right, my gelding kept having his head looking off to the left. Like, he couldn't get his head off to the left. And I got on him, and we were doing a nice little trot circle, and then started loping him. And I gave him a little kick on the left, and he just ducked down, threw his shoulder down. I went flying off the other side, and my trainer was looking there, and he's like, "I think I have an idea now." He's like, "I had to see it happen." I'm like, I'm glad I could be the test dummy on that one." But my colt, I just got he's about 8 months old now, little blue roan and stuff.
mhm,
He's awesome, but he's very left brain. You could tell he's just curious about everything. If I'm out there filling the water trough, throwing hay, he's like right under my armpit. I got him in the back pocket and stuff. And my mare, she kind of takes it or leaves it. At this point, she's just like, leave me alone. But
yeah,
it's really interesting to see the different dynamics of the horses and stuff. So thank you for explaining that left and right brain, because I'm sure people are like, what's he talking about, right brain?
yeah. And
Um,
to touch on what you were just saying,
yeah,
if he could possibly learn some bad behaviors, that is like a question that comes up all the time. If a horse is being bad, it's like, well, did somebody else scare them or teach them this,
yeah.
or was it innately they're a more difficult horse? And I feel like a lot of trainers and different people kind of get a bad rap for what they taught the horse, um, because if they know somebody else worked with them. But
Mm,
I just want to break that down a little bit because
yeah,
for
please.
me, it comes up all the time, and I kind of have a, a stance on this. And so I'm not a fan of blaming other people for what the horse is doing, because if they're innately more difficult,
Hmm.
it would be your margins of error are very thin. So, and
Good
if
point.
you actually make a mistake with a horse, I don't really see it as a mistake, because you didn't really know sometimes until you did it that it was going to be a problem. Like, you just,
Right.
it's an art form more than it's a science. Like, you can't get too technical about it, because it's just gonna they're an animal that can do things at different times.
Yeah.
So I always tell people horse training is 50-50. 50% of the time we're trying to teach them things we want them to know. The other
Hmm.
50% of the time we're trying to not teach them things we don't want them to know. But the more innately difficult the horse is, or more right brained, which doesn't, just because they're right brained doesn't mean they're really difficult, but
Yeah.
potentially they could be. As far as like dangerous behaviors of someone getting bucked off or run off with, something like that. Um, but if those margins of error are really thin, you're going to end up teaching them things you don't want them to know a lot easier than a horse who is more forgiving because they're more confident. And
Gotcha.
worst case scenario is they just kind of stop and do whatever. And as you're talking there, I was thinking about that probably relates to fitness with people as well.
Yeah,
Some people probably have higher tolerances where they can make a mistake on their diet and recover quicker, or they can
for
make a
sure.
mistake and miss a workout and get right back into it, or overdo it on a workout. And even though they're sore, still keep going and not give up or quit
Yeah,
that easy. But sometimes with those horses that are tough like that, the person who tried to work with them first gets a bad rap because they made mistakes. But it's like I don't consider it a mistake unless the person knew, like they worked with the horse and they were angry with them and
yeah,
they
and then they
lost their
kept
own
going
emotional
with it.
fitness and kept going. I would
Yeah,
say that's a mistake. Or if they knew better but did it anyways to try to look cool or do something that they just knew was kind of their bad idea, or overexposing the horse and they did it anyways, that would be a mistake. Other
yeah,
than that, a lot of times it's like limited knowledge, or it happened and we didn't know it was going to happen until it happens.
yeah,
Um,
for sure. And I didn't have much history on this horse before. I actually got him for free. Um, Mostly it was kind of funny because I was getting ready. Oh, I had my other horse, my mare, and I needed a companion for her. I just needed a companion for her so she wasn't alone anymore. And a friend of mine had an extra horse up at their family's ranch up in Ocala area, and um, just only got rode a couple times a year. Just kind of lived out in the pasture, doing its own thing. And it's been, in terms of health wise and just conformation and just everything. He's a great horse. He's just got some stuff in his past. I know that he's working through, whether it's innate within him or it was something that he did something wrong to him. I'll never know because I don't know who had him before my friend had him. But that makes a lot of sense, and how you tied that back to fitness makes a lot of sense too, because this is what's so frustrating about people looking at others on the internet and be like, hey, like this person can do it. This person's got a great body. This person's lifting all this weight. How come I can't? It's like genetics for the for first of all, right? And genetics are completely individualized, and then also you don't know about their history. You don't know their dieting history. You don't know their training history, their athletic history, all that stuff. So that makes a lot of sense how you tied that back in. I like that.
well, I think there's a
um
ton of mental stuff to it where like
100%.
it's like it's so easy to quit if you have a bad day, like bad
Yeah.
day at the gym or bad day on the diet or something. Like it's always staring at you, to like so much easier to go, go back
Oh,
to old
100%.
habits. Or
Resiliency is definitely,
like
I think
one
resiliency is
example,
like,
you giving me permission to drink diet soda was like a game changer for me, because if I'm on a diet, just
yeah.
having something that tastes kind of sweet that you enjoy,
Hmm.
and just like in the evening, like maybe instead of going and grabbing a bowl of ice cream or something, it's like,
Absolutely.
oh, just
It
have a
is
caffeine free soda.
It is
And
one of the biggest dieting hacks out there that nobody thinks about, because it gets a bad rap, right?
yeah,
Aspartame and like all these artificial sugars, but I mean we know from research that that doesn't have any harmful effect in moderation. Of course,
yeah,
I don't ever tell anybody go have a 2 liter of Diet Coke at
yeah,
night before you go to
yeah,
bed.
exactly.
That's not going to be good. But the whole left brain right brain thing with the horses makes me think then also about like type A and type B personalities in people, and the ones that can tend to stick to a plan a little bit. I don't want to say better, but maybe more consistently are going to be those type A's that
Yeah.
like, they live and die by a schedule. And listen, that's me. That's been me my whole life. And then type B's are a little bit more loose, and to be honest, the type of person I wish I could be a little bit more of. But those are the ones that are a little bit more free with their training and their nutrition and stuff like that. And they're like, "Oh, I'll make up for it tomorrow. I'll make up for it next week," stuff like that. It's funny how to relate that back to the horses and stuff too. But
Yeah, and
what?
it can be very direct. Like people can be right-brained or left-brained or more extroverted or more introverted. In the
Yeah.
same kind of chart that I used for diagnosing kind of where a horse is at, it actually applies very directly to people as well.
So when you're okay, that's a good segue into something. So when you get a horse for the first time, how long does it really take you to diagnose whether it's left brain, right brain, and kind of all that? Like you said, you have a chart that you kind of go off of. Like, what are you looking for with that?
It it's usually fairly easy, fairly quick. Um, the only thing that can kind of mess with it a little bit is what factors into their personality
Hmm.
is also what they've learned behavior. So if they've had a lot of bad experiences, you may not expose that as quickly of exactly where the horse is at innately. It may kind of
Yeah.
develop over a few weeks. But for the most part, it's so first of all, you look at, are they extroverted or introverted? And same with the person. It's like, would you, you tend to be quiet, especially in a group of people? Do you get quieter or do you get louder and more talkative and, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
So like with horses, extrovert, introverted is like moving their feet. If they're introverted, they're slower to move their feet. Doesn't mean they can't be scared and run fast or something, but it just means that left to their own devices, they're probably just standing around, or how busy they are with their mouth. Usually is
Mhm.
more a sign of more extroverted personality. With a human, it would be more like their mouth, like talk. It could be their feet too, moving around
Yeah.
quickly. Like my wife
Anxious.
is more extroverted, and she can't sit still for more than 15, 20 minutes. Where I'm like, I could sit and watch a whole movie and be happy to just, not move for a while.
I'm like your wife. My wife's like you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you can
Funny how
kind of,
they attract each other, right?
yep, yep.
Oh man.
So
What
yeah, it can go either way.
what has been now, listen, you've worked with tons of horses. I've seen you work with tons of horses just through your content, and that's probably not even half of what you've worked with in your whole life, right? Can you do you have one that sticks out in your mind that's been like the most difficult situation for you to work with, either to overcome the issue or dangerous or what?
Um, there's one horse in my mind that's probably the most difficult horse I've ever worked with. Dangerous is a little bit subjective because, like this particular horse, I wasn't trying to ride it; I was just trying to tame her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been in plenty of dangerous situations. There's kind of a long list of those moments.
Yeah,
Horses are inherently pretty dangerous
for
to
sure.
work with. There's not a lot safe about riding horses, but um, I used to do this Mustang taming course where I'd bring like 10 to 12 students in, and we'd take on 10 to 12 Mustangs and we'd tame them over 3 weeks. And there was one horse, and she just did not want to turn loose. And what's interesting is she was very introverted. So you could get close to her pretty quick, but she would not accept humans touching her.
Okay.
And she was just very introverted. I mean, and she just did not want to get tame like at all.
Yeah.
And we put the most amount of time into her. We went the slowest with her, trying to build her confidence, and it just wasn't really in the cards. And I wrote a letter. I don't know if I should probably say all this, but I'm going to say it. I wrote a letter to the Bureau of Land Management
Mhm.
saying, I believe this horse should go into a long-term holding facility, that she does not want to be tame, which is funny because you look at her in a pen and she looked like one of the quietest ones, but to try to make any progress with her, she just would not accept it. So all these other horses are loading into trailers and you can pick up their feet and get on them bareback and move them all around and lead them and halter them. And she still just does not want to be touched. It's like if your hand touched her, you would think you just gave her shocked her or something.
Yeah.
Um, so they said, okay, we'll do that. So I ended up, because part of the deal with that course was I don't want to send these horses back to the holding facilities. The goal
Right.
was, my commitment to those horses was, we're going to get them adopted. But this
Mhm.
particular horse, because you can't touch her, can't pick up her feet, she's not going to do well in any other environment than what they can offer her, because they can put them in chutes and give them, doctor them or trim their feet, things like that. Any other place I know of doesn't have the facilities to do that. So, long story short, like 2 or 3 months later, they adopted her out to somebody. And that person spent several years trying to make progress, and they didn't get any further than where she was when she left
Yeah.
there. And there's more to a little bit more to the story, but it was really unfortunate because she just, and I don't know where she's at now. That was many years ago. But she was never going to get the taming part. To me, is where they get to where they can be housed in captivity successfully. Like, you
Yeah.
can doctor them, you can trim their feet, you can halter them and lead them around, that kind of basic stuff. And she couldn't even get through that part. And you go, well, 3 weeks isn't a lot of time. But if you look at the amount of hours we spent in her
Right.
pen trying to
The
do it, it was a
consistency with
significant
it.
amount of time, enough to have it to be a qualified statement to say, I don't think this horse wants to be tame. And
Yeah.
it's amazing to me how hard it is for people to accept that, because they think, well, I got this other horse trained really well, really fast or whatever.
Right.
But if you have 1,000 zebras and they're not really on the domesticatable list, and one of those zebras is domesticatable because it grew up in captivity and was handled a lot, it's not that shocking to me that you could train one of them. But as a general, species, you're not really trying to train them. Where horses, to me, the opposite would be true. Then it's like you could have 1,000 of them, and 999 can be very trainable, and
Mhm.
one can be, like really
Yeah,
not want to be trained. And I don't know why people have to be so attached to their, every single one of them is fully trainable or whatever, because there's a whole, spectrum of levels of difficulty that they all have. And some of them just, it's not worth putting them through the stress that it would take to get them trained.
right.
It's not fair to them.
Yeah, like what's in their best interest too, right?
Yeah.
So like you talked about the BLM and these wild Mustangs and stuff. Do you know the numbers on how many are caught every year? And
I'm
like
not sure how many are caught, but I know it's a big, big problem. Like
yeah,
there is thousands and thousands of them in holding facilities that tax dollars all pay to
right.
take care of. And the exit strategy for them of getting them, the amount of time it takes and the level of skill that it takes to get them trained is not, is most people aren't aware of what that would take. And
Yeah,
another surprising fact is that the number one adopter of Mustangs is first time horse owners because they don't
that's
really know
nuts.
what they're getting into,
Yeah, I mean Mustang is such the Mustang is such a glorified horse throughout history, right? And the first time horse owner is like, well, Mustang, that's all I hear about. It's all I ever heard about. Like that's what I want. But yeah, I mean, the place where I was boarding my horses down in Florida, there was two women and they had three Mustangs between them. Now they were already trained and but they were caught out in, I want to say, Wyoming area years ago and stuff, and they were amazing horses. Like they were such good horses and everything. But yeah, they said there was a time there where it was a little hairy at first. But so that was, you kind of mentioned the exit strategy with that, and that's kind of where I wanted to get at, is like what what would be your, I guess, exit strategy with this? Like, would you just tell them, because they're catching them because they're tearing up farmland? Is that what they're doing out there? And that's why they're trying to catch them out there, right?
Yeah, there's only so many acres of land that can sustain a certain population of them, but they don't really have any natural predators. So unless they get like injured or something, put their foot in a
Right.
hole, or they
Come
there's
up with
not really a
like,
natural predator for them. I mean, I'm sure once in a while maybe a mountain lion snags a baby foal or something like that, but I think, and I don't know. I'm kind of talking out of turn here. I don't really know exactly. I don't know. I haven't studied the situation to know well enough. I just know there's too many horses in holding.
yeah.
Um, there probably needs to be some like birth control things
Okay. That's
focused on
that's what I was
there.
going to ask is,
But the problem is they're not trying to get rid of them completely, but trying to manage a small number without having them continue to populate is where the challenge comes in, because they
yeah,
can handle like there's enough land for like 75,000 of them, but there's maybe like 130,000 of them out there or something like that.
there's
And
a
so
lot.
it's just, yeah. So that's where the problem comes in.
Yeah, I mean that's the trouble, is like, you don't want to do birth control options on all of them, because like you said, you still want them to populate and everything like that, but you also don't want to see them living in a holding pen their whole life either. So
No, the holding pens are, I mean, they get fed and everything, but they're pretty horrible conditions, especially when you go to like, when somebody says, I want that one, and there's
yeah,
a pen of 50 of them, and they have to go in there to sort that one out. All the rest of them are bouncing off the panels, and the guys doing it are doing their best and are pretty good at it. They're really good at it, but
yeah,
nonetheless, they're still going to go bouncing around. And so a lot of them have eye problems from running into the panels, or injuries
mhm.
from in there. And I mean, they just go slamming around into each other, and it's kind of chaotic.
Yeah,
And
I mean, you get them in that close of quarters, there's going to be fighting amongst them. There's going to be
yeah,
kicking and biting and just all
exactly.
that stuff. It's just nasty. I hate to see it, but at the same time too, the overpopulation, there's just not a good solution right now. I mean, I wish there was more trainers like you that were dedicated to just being able to, work with them nonstop, but there's just too many. I mean, I know
Yeah,
from a little time I've spent around horse trainers, like you guys, you can't just train a horse. I know you talked about the 3 weeks thing and whatever, but even you admit, like, a horse is not going to be fully trained in 3 weeks. It takes months, years at times and stuff.
yeah,
Like, so I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine that issue. But I hate the thought of them being in holding pens too, and going through all that. So
yeah. It's a tough thing.
what would you say is we kind of talked a little bit about the most challenging horse part of it, right, that you've dealt with, but like what's the most challenging part of your career as a horse trainer?
Hmm, that's a good question. Probably learning about business. That's probably been
Mm,
the hardest part because
yeah.
like if you master your craft, you're going to be very busy with horse training. But I would say a lot of horse trainers that get good at it, they get very busy, maybe too busy, and they get burnt out. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the road I was heading down before I got into making YouTube videos and that sort of thing. Because there's a lot of pressure and stress on you when you're trying to deliver a really good product for all the customers, and it's a very subjective thing. It's not like a car where you got bad tires, take it in and get new tires on it, and it's done. Like
Yeah.
it's subjective. It's like, could I have done more? Could this event, And so I personally just felt a lot of pressure when I have a horse in training for somebody. And so I found it a lot easier to go teach a clinic, and help
Yeah.
people there. And I enjoyed that more. I enjoy training horses, but I enjoy training my own horses rather than um, trying to get as much done with the horse that I can for somebody else. That that's a challenging thing to do. And there's a pretty big need for it of good trainers out there. But someday one of my goals is to create a professionals program for people to be able to follow
Oh
that gives
yeah.
advice on how to be successful in the industry, how to be profitable, how to have a retirement plan, kind of
Well, you've
best
got
practices thing.
you're doing good setting up the Patreon page. If you want to plug that a little bit, you could talk about that.
Yeah. So the YouTube channel led me to setting up a Patreon page where it's more like the paid content that's like
Yeah.
really detailed training videos and that sort of thing. And we're almost at 3,000 members on there, so that's going pretty
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And that's why I was getting like the business side of it. Like same thing happens with coaching. Like for me, like you can only take on so many clients before quality starts dropping, and you have to learn how to, the business part of it. And I was lucky because both my parents are entrepreneurs, so like I've always had the business side. So once I learned, the skills and the knowledge and everything, it wasn't that bad. But even now at this point, like I'm having to relearn like, okay, what can I do business wise? Because I'm like maxed out at where I can be on a daily basis with clients, but like there's always more that you can do. And your Patreon page I know helps a lot of people, which is awesome, plus your content and everything, which is good. But that professionals program, I think that would be huge. I think you could really do a lot because you've got a good way to communicate when you're when you're in the videos and all your content and everything. Like it's very concise, it's very clear, like it's easy to follow. So no doubt in my mind that would transfer over from the business side. And you've been in this for a while, you've done things right. I'm sure you've made many mistakes when it comes to business and you've learned from it. And especially, I think the only thing that I kind of wonder about is like how much of the younger generation is wanting to get into horse training and can see that as being a good career, right?
Yeah, it
And
seems I get asked for internships a lot, and
oh, good, good,
that's right now that's the best route for people that are in the industry that want to become a professional is to find a really good trainer that they like and how they
yeah,
do things and staying with them for 2 or 3 years and learning the ins and outs from them. But I think the part that most people don't know much about is money. It's like how to manage their own personal budget and finances and
sure,
how to plan for retirement and that sort of thing. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest pain points for a lot of people is if you're not good with your money, then you end up taking every job that gets offered to you to try to pay the bills. And then you end up working like 12, 14 hours a day, every single day. And they're not as deliberate about setting up a schedule and a system for it of going, well, this is my max capacity. This is a good
yeah.
six horses versus 12 or whatever it is. Figuring
Yeah,
that
and
out.
it's kind of different, like in your situation, because in certain cases, like certain professions, like you have to kind of, I don't want to say work yourself to the bone, but like you have to kind of push the limit in order to kind of build up a reputation and build up that proof, right?
Mhm.
But with horse training, like it's kind of the opposite, I think. And please correct me if I'm wrong, because it's like if you get too many horses, you're not going to be able to maximize any of them.
Exactly.
Right. And so there is that kind of fine balance there in your world and stuff. And you talked about interns. That was one of the biggest accelerators of my career was even at, I got out of the army and started going back to school, even at 32, when I started it, being an intern, um, which is just crazy for me to even think about at that point. I mean, I was doing internships when I was 18, 19, 20 years old with different sports teams and nutrition and all that stuff. Um, but that's one thing that I'm glad you have a bunch of people contacting you about, because there's a lot of young generations that don't want to work for free these days, right? They don't
Yeah.
want to put in that time. But do you currently have an intern? And if so, like how many interns do you bring on at a time?
I'm not right now because I'm trying to keep my schedule flexible. And when I have
Yeah,
interns, I take that commitment to them very serious. If they're, working hard for me, then I want to make sure I'm giving them the time that I've kind of committed to them.
for
And
sure.
then right now I got to have my schedule a little more flexible. So if there's a crazy horse to go film somewhere, I can
Yeah.
go get that done. So I'm not doing any internships right now, but that is still the best spot for people that are wanting to become a professional. There's not really like a school or a program there's ones that'll teach you some horsemanship stuff, but even that's going to be pretty limited, over like 6 months or a year or whatever. I mean, you
Yeah.
really need to it takes a long time to get really good at horses. So you got to really immerse yourself in that for years.
And a lot of different horses you got to see, for
Yeah.
sure.
And the biggest hole that I see isn't where people can learn the horsemanship. It's more of there's not really anybody teaching the business side of it.
Mm.
And that's where I someday I'm going to create a program that can help people out with that.
Oh, that's going to be
Because we
awesome.
need more professionals. We need, especially horse training. There's a big need for training.
Yeah.
There's probably a need for lessons and stuff like that locally too. But there's a lot of horses that need to be trained.
You talked about your like mentor when you were younger. Who are some of the guys like in the industry now that like maybe you looked up to and now are friends and colleagues and stuff? Like who are some other trainers that you really highly respect and kind of pick their brains off of and stuff?
Yeah, probably my number one mentor is a guy named Doug Jordan, who's
Okay.
in the Cutting Horse Hall of Fame, and his attention to detail of being able to read a horse and get the horse to understand the idea that he's trying to communicate to it is like just unreal. And so what I tried to do is take what I was learning from him about cutting, training a horse to hook onto a cow and hold it out of a herd.
Hmm.
I tried to take those principles and apply it to everything else that I was doing, whether it was trailer loading or groundwork or liberty or changing leads and all these different things that we do with horses, and applying that mentality that he had of doing less first, working with the horse where it's at, um, and how to get the horse to connect to the idea before you focus on getting them to be in the right position.
Yeah.
Um, that really was a game changer. Then there's another
Where,
guy named Craig Johnson, who's a many-time world champion reining horse trainer,
okay.
that I've studied quite a bit with. I need to spend some more time with him coming up here.
Where's Doug out of?
Doug's in Texas,
Okay. And where's
near
Craig out of?
Greenville, and Craig's in Shell Rock, Iowa.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
You talked right before we asked that question about traveling around to different horses and stuff, and I love those videos and stuff. You go into different places. Where's like, do you kind of have a general area that you stick to, or like have you been everywhere to go train a horse? Like if it's the right situation and it makes good content and stuff, like you'll go
Yeah.
pretty much anywhere.
Yeah. I'm pretty fortunate. I've gotten to go all over the world doing it. So I've been to a lot of different countries, and nowhere's really off limits.
Where's been your favorite place? Not necessarily the favorite horse to train, but your favorite place to go do it.
Um, I mean, I really enjoy all of them. Like, I have some friends in Italy, and the food there is incredible, and the people there are just super, super awesome and nice. New Zealand was really beautiful, like the country, and I like the ocean. So, like the shoreline and stuff that we were at in New Zealand was really beautiful. Um,
My wife and I went to Italy for our honeymoon years ago. We're actually our 5-year wedding anniversary is this weekend. And we went to Italy for like 12 days. And we were just the other day, another conversation we were having at our, you know, once a month date night that we get because of a toddler. We were talking about wanting to do another trip to Italy because we just didn't see enough there. Italy is fantastic. It's just so
yeah,
much fun. And New Zealand is on our bucket list, Australia, all that good stuff.
yeah.
What so you mentioned a little bit ago about your wife, and your wife is actually a trainer too, right?
She's she does train horses, but
Yeah,
she's more of a equine physical therapist.
equine physical therapist.
So she
That's
was
amazing.
a
That's an
human.
amazing combo to have right there, for
Yeah. So she
sure.
was a human physical therapist and did that for like 8 years.
Okay.
And then got into, there's a certification program, and now she teaches that certification program to become an equine rehab practitioner, is the official. title. So
What?
she really enjoys helping those horses, especially like really high level competition horses.
Oh, absolutely. What did she think was harder? The learning how to do it on humans or learning to do it on horses?
I'm not sure if I've ever asked her that specifically, but what's hard about a horse is they can't tell you, oh, this hurts or that hurts. And you can cover things up by training or putting pressure on them and kind of making them do something. And so she's really, really good at studying the horse when it's left to its own devices.
Hmm.
And like, so she's had like some really complicated cases that vets couldn't figure out what was wrong or what to do next. And she would notice like, well, in the pasture, it'll swat flies off its left side, but it won't on the right side. It's like it's sore there or whatever. So she just really kind of has an innate, a good intuition about it
Yeah.
and studying the horse. And there's no details that she misses. She just pays attention to everything.
That's the first thing that came to mind when you start talking about in the pasture swatting flies. I'm like, that attention to detail is just amazing right there. I mean, that's going to tell you quite a bit. And people that have that gift to be able to kind of just tune everything out and just focus and see every little detail. I need to get her on the podcast and talk to her about the differences between physical therapy with humans and with
Yeah.
horses too. That would be a good one to do too. So how'd you
Yeah,
guys meet?
definitely. So I kept my horse we were boarded at the same barn when I first got
Okay.
started up in Wisconsin. And she would get off work at like 3 o'clock and be riding her horse every day at 4. So I
Yeah.
found myself riding in the arena every day at 4 too.
I was going to say, how much of your schedule changed once you started
Yep.
getting dry on her?
Yep. I started getting consistent with my ride time.
Oh, that's great. And you guys are up in Wisconsin most of the time, right?
Yep.
You're still up there? Yeah. And you're down in a little north of Ocala now. Do you guys have a place down there or are you just kind of
Yep.
vacationing a little bit?
Yep. We bought a place down here. We've been down here for a few years. At first we were renting and now we bought a place here and gives us a little break from the weather up in Wisconsin.
I'll tell you what, up here, I mean, the other day in Northwest Indiana, it was 70 during the day and dropped down to 27 and snowing at night. Gotta love
Yeah.
this Midwest weather up here. I've been gone from up here for like almost 20 years. Like after high school, after college, I moved down to Florida and then I was down there for a little bit and then joined the Army. And then when I got out of the Army, I was kind of bouncing around on the West Coast a little bit, came back to Florida and have been there, off and on for the last 20 years. And um, even for me, it's been a little bit getting used to this cold weather back up here and everything. But I like the season changes and stuff. It's fun.
Yeah.
My horses
Yeah.
were a little surprised when we hit some negative 30-degree temperatures there about a month or two ago. That was a little
Yeah.
rough, but they got through it. They're troopers.
Yeah. I have a
Um,
question for you if you don't mind.
yeah, go
So
for
with
it.
horses, we try to build their emotional fitness. So
Hmm.
like we're talking about horses being right brain or left brain, and you can't really change that innate disposition, but you can improve their response to pressure by building their emotional fitness, basically by deliberately putting them in difficult situations that are set up to be successful
Yeah,
versus waiting for something to happen. And, if the horse bucks you off on the trail ride and runs back to the barn and gets relief at the barn, you just created a really bad, response to that pressure.
yeah, that's a hard one to break. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
versus, exposing it when things are going well and then developing that area. But when you're working with people, how much of what you're doing with them is focused on building their emotional fitness to what they're doing as well?
So this is what I tell a lot of people because I'll do consultations and mentoring like up and coming coaches and everything. And a lot of times they'll want to talk about like the X's and O's, like the macros and all that stuff. I'm like, first of all, you got to learn how to read people. You got to learn how to communicate with people. And one of the biggest challenges that I have, which is also one of the most rewarding things, is overcoming those mental hurdles, right? Especially with humans, you've got trauma from childhood. You've got with women and stuff, a lot of their issues with food dates back to like how their parents and their mom talked to them about food and sports having to make a certain weight. So you're dealing with a lot of stuff. In some cases, I'm dealing with 5 decades worth of things to overcome. And so that emotional side of it is huge. And so the biggest thing, and it's kind of like what you do with horses, is I call it exposure therapy. It's basically the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So we want to push you outside of your comfort zone, but not to the point where you're going to be running back to the barn every time. You know what I mean? So we do kind of set up some of those things. So with some people, if they're afraid to eat out, right? Like they're like, I can't eat out. I keep control. I go over calories, all that stuff. We just try by something small. Right? Okay, just go and, it may even be just go to Subway, get a 6-inch sub, right? Nothing bad about that. Just get a 6-inch sub and try to eat as much of it as you can. And just little by little, keep building up that tolerance. For some people, it may be alcohol's the issue, right? I've got people where I've worked with them and they're drinking 4 or 5 drinks a night. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, we obviously know we want to cut that back, right? I don't think there's any question about that. But taking you from 4 or 5 down to 0 is not going to happen overnight. So let's just try to cut back by 1 and then kind of do that little by little. And it's the same thing. I mean, with humans, the thing about humans, and maybe this is true with horses too, I'd be interested to get your take, but we have the ability to make ourselves believe or not believe anything, right? Like if you want to think that drinking every night is good for you, you're going to make yourself believe that it's okay, right? So it's kind of overcoming some of those limiting beliefs or those self-sabotaging beliefs too. And the thing is you just got to go slow with it, and you're going to take some steps backwards. Like, I'll tell people, if we can get 2 or 3 steps forward before we take a step backward, we're good. We're going to keep moving forward. It's very similar, it sounds like, to what you do with horses and stuff. It's just,
Yeah.
humans have such a complex life, right? There's relationships, there's work, there's past history, all that stuff you're dealing with. With horses, you have their past history and you have their innate just personality. And they have their own set of complications and stuff. So there's no easy path when you're overcoming any sort of mental or emotional challenges with human or animal. Like, it's complex, but taking your approach that you take with horses is kind of what it sounds like I take with my clients too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of my favorite horse training phrases is work with your horse where they're at, because it's so
Yes.
easy to go into a session with an expectation. And then as soon as the horse is in a different mindset that day compared to where it was yesterday or whatever,
Right.
you can be very disappointed. Then you can become very frustrated if it's not where you expect it to be. But if you go into it open-minded and say, I'm going to try to understand where the horse is today, how fast or slow is it, how reactive, how dull,
Yeah.
and work from there, it's so much better. And it really helps you pick the right thing for the right time. And it
For sure.
sounds like that's exactly what you're doing, is you're trying to understand where that person's at and just asking them to make an achievable change versus
Yes.
completely reversing everything in one day.
I do a pretty comprehensive like consultation before I work with somebody, so I'm getting a lot of their back history, I'm getting their current lifestyle, all this stuff. But what I tell every single person when I sign up and I'm sending them their first plan is, um, you're here. This is where I want to get you. What we need to do is I need to move closer here. And what we're going to do is kind of combine science and evidence based research that we know and we're going to mesh you together. And we're going to kind of walk this along little by little here. Um, Set achievable benchmarks, because not only is that moving you in the right direction, it's building confidence. And that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing I find with people, is that lack of confidence and everything. And I'm sure it's the same thing with horses. Like, you have to make them believe that they can do it.
Yeah.
And
You got
the
to have
only way
enough of
you're
those
going to do that
wins
is by
to
them
build some
actually
momentum.
doing it. Right. And it's interesting because with with horses and stuff, like, yeah, one day they can be great. And then for absolutely no reason that, the next day they could be having issues with that same thing. And that's where, that consistency every single day, and like, you have the ability to do that. And that's why you can take a Mustang and in 3 weeks have it, maybe not, obviously not perfect, right? But you can have it so far along. Um, and most people don't have the time to dedicate to themselves or their horse like that. And that's why
Yeah.
they probably hear that and they say, like, 3 weeks, like, I've been working with my horse for 2 months. How come he's not there? Well, you work with him like for 20 minutes every other day or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I even have that issue too. And that's one thing that I wish I could be a little bit more consistent with. And I'm, especially with my colt, like, as he starts to get older, like, I'm carving out more and more time in my schedule, even if it's just 15 or 20 minutes a day,
Yeah.
right? Like right now with him, um, when I first got him, he would not let me really rub under his belly and his girth, and I mean, he was bucking out at me and everything like that. We're good with that. I can go just rub and have some fun with that. I actually got because it was so cold here for a little while, I got him a coat, a blanket, And he actually let me get that on him in about 10 or 12 minutes, that was an interesting process. He was not a fan of it at first. And then but he's a very smart horse. I can already tell off the bat. But right now, the issue we're having is I can't get him to stand or pick up his hose for the farrier.
Mm.
And so we're working on that little by little and stuff. And now I'm to the point where I can rub my hand down his leg and I can kind of pick it up a little bit for a few seconds before. But he used to buck out at me, and he popped me once in the leg and stuff too. I got popped by my mare the other day, not because she's vicious or anything, but she's very territorial about her food.
Yeah.
And I'm always careful about feeding her on the side and the other horses away from her. But one of them got a little too close to her, and she bucked out, and then she whipped around real quick, and I couldn't get out of the way in time. She popped me right in the left thigh. Luckily, it was at full extension, so it wasn't like right there where she got full power. I'm still feeling a little bruised by that, but
Wow.
But just that consistency with the horses is so crucial, and it's the same way with human beings. Like if you try to change a habit or a lifestyle or anything, and you're just doing it every so often, it's never going to stick. I mean, do you have to be 100% perfect all the time? No, you don't. Nobody in their right mind is going to be able to do that. Like the things pop up. And that's what I try to teach with my clients is that, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for progress. And as you start building these new habits little by little, your lifestyle changes and it becomes second nature. Like so many people I work with have never tracked calories or macros in their life. And they're like, how do people do this? This is so time consuming. This is so annoying. I'm like, yeah, it is at first, but so is anything.
Yeah.
Like it becomes so second nature to looking at portion sizes and just entering it in there. And it's like, you're going to get to a point where at somewhere down the road, you're gonna be like, man, why wasn't I doing this 5 years ago? Right? Like this is so easy. And, with training horses, like you got to get them to that point, right? Where they're like, oh man, I don't even remember that old behavior. Like this is what I want to do. Like actually trying to make it seem like it's their idea, right? To do it.
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to stick. And that's how it sticks with humans. So
Nice.
I want to be respectful of your time.
Can I ask you one more
yeah,
fitness question?
For sure.
So starting in January, I went on a diet and started lifting weights. And so I'm down like 15 pounds. Nice. And I work out 3 or 4 times a week. What do you think would be a realistic, like if you're assuming you're eating enough protein and that sort of thing, what would be possible in terms of somebody adding muscle
during a weight loss phase?
Yeah.
So there's 3 categories of people that we see some muscle gain when it comes to losing fat at the same time. And that's if somebody's just completely new to training, they haven't ever picked up a weight before. Somebody's really overweight, like obese overweight. They obviously have enough reserves in their body to kind of fulfill their needs. Or if somebody has taken a long extended period out of the gym and they're just like detrained. We usually kind of think of that like in the year or 2 year span. Those people can kind of see maybe potentially a little bit of muscle growth as they're dieting down. The big things you want to concentrate on is, and that's also going to depend on where you're starting at calorie wise too. Like someone who's got a lot of calories and coming down, they have a lot more room to be able to do that. Keeping your protein high, you mentioned that. That's number one. Diet slow. Don't be in a rush. So typically we'll tell people anywhere between 0.5% to 1% total body weight loss per week is a good range. We kind of see that's the range where we're seeing majority of fat compared to lean body mass come off. So lean body mass is not just muscle. It's everything in your body that's not fat. So water, bone, organ, muscle too is part of that. It's funny because when I factor in and I calculate someone's lean body mass based off their body fat percentage, let's just say, for example, it's like 160 pounds of lean body mass. I'm like, whoa, I'm like, that's not muscle. That's not 160 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
I wish it was, but so it's fun to kind of educate people about that.
So it would be pretty challenging to add muscle while you're at a calorie deficit.
Yes, for the majority of people. But what we're trying to do in terms of continuously weight training and pushing ourselves with that is to retain the muscle that you do have. Yeah. So keep your metabolic rate good. Plus, you diet down, if you lose all your muscle, your physique looks like crap. Muscle's
Yeah.
good. And then that way, then when you shed the body fat off, you still got a good majority of your muscle left. And then we work on slowly building from there, where we try to limit the fat gain as we're kind of building up. So all in stages and stuff. There is some body recomposition that can happen along the way, where there is a little bit of muscle and stuff that replaces some body fat. But if it's not going to be anything significant.
Mm.
Most of the time when people are losing body fat and then they see like, oh my gosh, my muscles are popping out. It's like those muscles have always been there. You just had a bunch of water and body fat around them that we stripped off, right?
Yeah.
So, don't think of it in terms of like it's a disappointment if you don't add muscle. Still lift as hard as you can. And what I mean by that is within a couple reps of failure. All right. For
Mm.
whatever rep scheme you're in, you can build muscle in all rep schemes. The important thing is to keep that intensity up there. You don't want to go to failure all the time because you're going to burn out, you're going to risk injury, and you just simply don't need to. You're not going to
Mm.
recover as well, especially if you are in a deficit and you're not taking in as much calories. But you said you're doing 3 or 4 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fine for weight training. Don't overdo it with the cardio. Kind of find that good balance there. And I always use with my clients, I use cardio as a tool. So whenever we're starting a fat loss phase, I'm keeping cardio as low as possible. And I'm working on the diet and the weight training aspect of it first, because we can always bump cardio up little by
Yeah.
little. If you start off and let's say you're doing like 2 hours a week of cardio, your body's going to start to adapt to that. You're
Yeah.
not going to be burning as many calories as you did when you started at that. And then it's like, okay, does anybody really have time to do that much cardio? I mean, I've
It's so
prepped
funny you're
people.
saying this because I've been following you, on your Instagram
Yeah.
and, reading the tips and stuff like that. And there's what I love about it is they're super practical, like really
I
practical
appreciate that.
things that people can use. A lot of things are just that I don't think most people can't really just implement them into what they're doing. But this summer I was getting ready for a marathon.
Oh, wow.
And I got up to running like 15 miles and I wasn't losing any body fat at all running. And so I was really happy to cut out the cardio.
Yeah. Were you tracking your calories at the time?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I
I
was
would say
trying to
that's,
eat better, but I was thinking, well, man, I just burned, 1,400 calories on that run. Like I'm going to be in great shape, It didn't
yeah.
work that way. Like,
Your body was probably experiencing some like metabolic adaptation occurring and stuff
yeah,
like that. But and that happens a lot with people because they do, when they want to start a fat loss phase, they just completely eliminate weight training and start adding a bunch of cardio. When in reality, the weight training and the resistance training is going to keep your metabolism elevated for 48 to 72 hours after you lift. Whereas with cardio, when you get done, you're basically done burning at that point. And so what you're doing is you're wasting away a lot of muscle, which then is lowering your metabolic rate. And
wow,
it's just this vicious cycle people find themselves in. And I'll tell people, especially people that are 50 or older, like they grew up in that generation where it's like, oh, you just slash calories and add a bunch of cardio,
yeah,
where nobody really understood how the metabolism worked. Now we have science and we have more data to show for it, so we have a more effective way to diet. But I'm glad to hear you start incorporating some weight training, and thank you for that kind compliment, because that's my whole goal, is to like take complicated things and break it down into simple terms, because nobody has time to understand the complicated stuff. Like people want to know, like, how can I implement this into my busy lifestyle and still sustain it?
yeah.
And that's my whole goal and our whole goal as coaches. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's really good. It's really practical, especially the concept of like doing it kind of dieting the right way. Because
Mhm.
like before, I would, if I was feeling overweight, I would go on like a crash diet and cut down to like under 1,000 calories,
Oh yeah,
and you'd lose weight, but then like you rebound hard after like
for
to come off
sure.
that, and then I would end up going up higher than I was before I even went on that crash diet. And so
Yeah.
this time I've been kind of following a lot of your tips, and um,
Well, I'm
I'm
glad they're helping. I
working
always
a lot
like to
better.
say, like, my whole goal when I work with someone during a fat loss, well, any stage, whether we're reverse dieting or fat loss or whatever, is like I'm always thinking about the next stage after that, right? Because like what we do in this stage is going to determine how effective the next stage is, right? Whether it's setting you up for a building phase afterwards, or you're building and we're setting you up for a fat loss phase after, right? So having that, next step in mind, which to be honest, sometimes gets me in trouble because I can't stay in the present. I'm always thinking too far in the future. My wife always tells me that. But in terms of, physique changes and things like that, it's very helpful. So, man, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your time. Man, you've been a huge help for me, someone that I really, really admire and always watch your content. And
Awesome.
I've learned a lot from you. I still have a lot to learn through your videos and stuff. And I really hope to meet you one day. I mean, obviously, I'm not down in Florida anymore now, but if you have another clinic up in Wisconsin, I'd love to try to come up and attend. So,
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get together this summer.
absolutely. Where can people find you? Your Instagram, your Patreon page, all that stuff.
Yeah, so it's all Ryan Rose horsemanship. But yeah, the YouTube channel is a lot of fun. Even if you're not riding or training your own horses, I try to tell the story of an owner that's struggling, having challenges, and in danger, and then try to help kind of restart the horse. And I think those stories are pretty interesting. And
They
a lot
are.
of people tune in for some of my near death experiences riding them. But
It's
hey,
funny. It's funny what gets views on YouTube, isn't it?
yeah.
I'll link all his stuff below too, guys. Ryan, one thing I like to do when I end these is ask the guest, what is your either favorite quote or the quote that has like been most meaningful to you in your journey?
So my dad, growing up, being in the Michigan State Police, there was a phrase that they used to say every morning before they do PT. And I don't remember who the original author is, but the phrase is, if you think you can, you will. If you think you can't, you're right. And so
I love it.
I always try to focus on thinking that I can do it and keep going.
That's awesome, man. Well, that's carried you far in your career, and it will continue to carry you. And really get to thinking about that business, the professional course, because I think you would kill that, and I think it would do really, really well. And like you said, there's a need for it in the industry. So,
Cool.
Ryan,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your time, man. You guys go check him out. Even if you're someone who doesn't ride horses, it's really interesting looking at the different horses and the different stories that he gets to work with. So, thanks again, man. I
Awesome.
appreciate your
Thanks,
time.
David. Have a good one.